Zeno was thrilled as he stepped into the air traffic control station for the first time. It was his dream job, and after years of hard work, he had finally made it. As the youngest and least experienced employee, he was nervous about proving himself to his colleagues. The seasoned air traffic controllers welcomed him warmly, showing him how to use the equipment and monitor the skies. The station buzzed with activity as planes took off and landed seamlessly. Everything was going according to plan, and Zeno was proud of how well he was keeping up with the fast-paced environment. As the day progressed, most of his colleagues went on their lunch break, leaving Zeno and a few others to monitor the radar screens. Suddenly, the usual chatter of the control tower faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Zeno scanned the monitors, ensuring everything was running smoothly. Just when he thought it was another routine day, something strange happened. A plane on his radar veered off its planned route and began moving erratically. At first, he assumed it was a minor issue, perhaps a small turbulence correction. But as the aircraft continued to ignore designated flight paths, Zeno's stomach dropped. Something was seriously wrong. Zeno squinted at the screen, trying to understand the plane's unpredictable behavior. It swerved left, then right, then dipped suddenly before climbing again. He attempted to contact the pilot, but there was no response. His heart began to race. Was it a mechanical failure? A hijacking? The uncertainty made him hesitant. He looked around for his mentor, but the break room was still occupied. He was on his own. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, and panic threatened to take over. Should he raise the alarm? What if it was just a mistake? What if he overreacted on his very first day? Before he could decide, the plane vanished from the radar entirely. One moment, it was zigzagging across the screen, and the next, it was gone. Zeno's breath caught in his throat. Planes didn't just disappear. His hands hovered over the controls, unsure of his next move. Should he report it, or wait for it to reappear? He hesitated, fearing the repercussions if he was wrong. If passengers were on board, their lives could be in danger. But if this was some kind of glitch or miscalculation, he could end up embarrassing himself and losing his job on the first day. When his colleagues returned, Zeno made a split-second decision to inform them. To his relief, they didn't ridicule him or dismiss his concerns. Instead, they jumped into action. Together, they checked with other air traffic control stations to see if anyone else had spotted the missing plane. Just when it seemed like the aircraft had vanished without a trace, it suddenly reappeared on the radar. But something was still wrong. It was flying as if controlled by someone with no experience, making sharp, unpredictable turns and ignoring all safety protocols. And worst of all, it was headed straight for another commercial plane. A wave of terror swept through the control room as the passenger plane contacted them. ATC, we have an unidentified aircraft on our path, requesting permission to adjust course. Zeno's mind raced. If he approved, it could cause other flight path complications. If he refused, a collision was imminent. He hesitated for a moment too long, and just as he was about to respond, something unexpected happened. The rogue plane made a sudden U-turn. Gasps filled the room as everyone stared at the radar. It was as if the pilot had changed their mind at the last possible second. But why? And who was flying this plane? With no contact from the rogue aircraft and no idea who was controlling it, the air traffic controllers had no choice but to escalate the situation. Zeno's mentor stepped in and made the call. They needed military intervention. The possibility of a hijacking or an unqualified pilot was too dangerous to ignore. Minutes later, fighter jets were dispatched to intercept the mysterious plane. The entire air traffic control team watched anxiously as the jets approached the aircraft, hoping to establish communication and force a safe landing. As the fighter jets neared, Zeno's radio, silent this entire time, suddenly crackled to life. A voice, weak and desperate, whispered, "Do not let them shoot me. Please." Zeno froze. He looked around, but none of his colleagues seemed to have heard it. His pulse pounded in his ears as he processed what he had just heard. Whoever was in that plane was afraid, pleading for their life. Was this truly a hijacking, or was there another explanation? He had to act fast. He quickly relayed the message to his mentor, who ordered the fighter jets to hold their fire until they figured out what was going on. After checking the database, Rob, one of the senior controllers, identified the pilot. His expression shifted from concern to exasperation. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. It turned out the pilot was John, an old colleague of Rob's who was supposed to be on his final flight before retiring. In an attempt to leave a memorable mark, John had decided to pull a reckless prank, drawing patterns in the sky as a joke. His co-pilot, completely unaware of the stunt, had panicked, making things worse. What was supposed to be a harmless farewell joke had escalated into a full-blown national security crisis. The military jets escorted John's plane to a safe landing, where he was immediately detained by airport security. His co-pilot emerged from the aircraft furious, shouting about the reckless stunt that had endangered countless lives. After a tense interrogation, John was released but faced serious consequences. He was fined, stripped of his pilot's license, and sentenced to community service. Meanwhile, Zeno, still in shock from the day's events, realized that his first shift would be one he would never forget. He had wanted excitement in his career, but he never imagined he'd be at the center of such a dramatic event on day one. Though John's actions were reckless, Zeno couldn't help but appreciate the irony. What was meant to be a simple first day had turned into a story he would be telling for the rest of his life.